Welcome back to another episode on the Expand Your Awareness 2.0 podcast. My name is Aaron Doughty, and today I'm going to be sharing with you some of the most powerful information when it comes to quantum physics, when it comes to creating our own reality that I've applied in my own life. And a lot of it's actually rooted in deep, is it Buddhism? It's deep ancient texts that talk about this. And even someone like Buddha, our homie Buddha, he said that what you think you become, what you think you attract. And as simple as that is, when we begin to take into consideration the way we've been thinking, and we start to think about what we've been thinking, it's a very powerful place because that's really where awareness comes from. Now, in this episode, I'm more specifically going to be sharing with you the teachings of Dr. Joe Dispenza, and I'm going to be simplifying them all in one episode, making it extremely easy for you to know how to apply this in your life. It's some of the most potent information in just however long this episode ends up being. However, it's also going to be very practical. I'm going to share with you exactly what to do as well. It's not just going to be the theoretical ideas, our thoughts create our reality, quantum physics, and all this. It's going to be, what do you actually do, and how do you want to apply it in your life? And the information I'm sharing with you today, I've applied in my own life. You may have seen me earlier in my YouTube journey, in my earlier YouTube videos 3 years ago. I was talking about, one thing I'll be talking about today is how our personality creates our personal reality, which is a quote that I got from Dr. Joe Dispenza. I shared that back in 2016-17, and that video was one of the first times I talked about some of Dr. Joe Dispenza's teachings. Nonetheless, it's something I've been into for a while, and you can look at my own results. Look at the results in my own life as proof that it does work. Sometimes the way it works is whatever we believe then shows us what's possible. And when you can see that I've used it and I've applied it in my own life, and then I've also had a similar result, then you may go, oh, well, if Aaron did it, Aaron went from working that 9-to-5 job that he didn't like to then being a full-time YouTuber and now traveling the world, speaking, lives in a lot of abundance and stuff. If he could do it, then I could do it too. And that's the idea behind some of what I share. So the first part of Dr. Joe Dispenza, which if you don't know who he is, he was in a documentary called What the Bleep Do We Know? He bridges quantum physics with practicality and understanding how we can apply it in our own life. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is our personality, which is a combination of how we think, how we feel, how we act. These three things make up our personality. Now, we've been preconditioned in life to believe that changing our personality is a bad thing. I remember this even when I was years ago. I was with friends, and if somebody changed a little bit, sometimes we'd be like, we do this. It was almost like a joke, but it was kind of serious. It's like, bro, you've changed, dude. You've changed, and it was like I changed, as if it was a bad thing. But the part of it that's important to understand is how we think, feel, and act, which is our personality. If we want a new reality, we got to change one of those. The problem is that we believe that we are what we have priorly thought, felt, and acted. We bring and drag the past into the present moment, and that many times is why the present moment has so much power over us in the present moment right now, because we believe that it does. We tell ourselves that same story. We are in the habitualization of it. And I'll talk a little bit more about the three parts of our brain and how that affects our identity and who we are. But in general, once we've habitualized a certain way that we think, feel, and act, and we've acted consistent to that for a period of time, that then becomes a part of our identity, the way that we see ourselves, who we are. And then we say, that's who I am. And if we think of anything outside of that, or we start doing anything inside of that, people start to wonder, what the heck is going on with this person? Why are they challenging the way that I expect to see them? And as I've gone through my own spiritual awakening, and the spiritual awakening as well, by the way, is a shift in personality and a shift in the way you think, feel, and act. That's for sure. And when I went through that, a lot of friends and family were like, what the hell's going on with Aaron? And the part of it that was important to understand was that if I wanted to change my life at all, I had to break down the prior image that I had created that was familiar. So if I were to summarize all of Dr. Joe Dispenza's teachings, it would be understanding that first off, we have the old self. A lot of the stuff that though I've realized that a lot of the stuff that I teach as well is very similar. Maybe it was influenced by Dr. Joe Dispenza. A lot of what I teach is a mix of many different amounts of information I've learned. Never said that all of these ideas are my original ideas. I came up with all of them. But when it comes to Dr. Joe Dispenza, it's similar to probably things you've heard me say before, which is first off, we have an identity, a way that we see ourselves, a way we've thinking, feeling, and acted for a period of time that's been on autopilot, that has been comfortable. Now, what happens is when we continue to live in that reality and that identity, we continue to get the same reality. And then there's an identity, there's a version of us that's living our ideal lifestyle. It's on this side. It's over here. And if you can't see me because you're on the podcast right now, I'm putting my hands up on a different side of the table. This is the other version of us that's living the ideal life that we want to live. And that version of us thinks, feels, and acts a certain way. That version of us has a certain level of awareness about who we are. That version of us has certain beliefs. That version of us has certain habits. That version of us reads certain types of books. So what happens is we must first off become aware of the old way of being, of the way that we've been, and then remember that that's not who we prefer to be anymore. Then what we do is we simply decide that this is who we are now, this new version of us. And the way that Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about it is because we've been habitualized in this old version of us, we have to first off become aware of it. We have to think about what we've been thinking about, because when we're just in this identity, we're just thinking, and we think this is the way reality is. But then when we start to become aware of it, that's when we can then separate ourselves from it and then decide. Sorry if that sounded very loud. The mic just dropped. But what we can do is decide who we are now and begin to wire that version of us in. And one of the most powerful ways to do that I found is meditation. And maybe you've listened to some, I have like 100 meditations on YouTube, and I think, I'm always blown away by the kind of experiences that people have with meditation. Because not really, because I understand that our reality is a reflection of what we believe it to be, and when we change that belief and we start to go beyond our current body, our current identity, we start to make way for something new to happen. So I look at one of, for example, I've shared this story a couple times. There was somebody I met that had a profound experience listening to one of my meditations. I went to my buddy Victor Odo's retreat in Sedona, and he told some of his, the people there's like 30 people there probably, 20, 30 people there. He told the people there that I would come. They may have known me from my videos or something like that. So I go to this. I was like the last day of the retreat. I give like a 30-minute talk, and afterwards, someone comes up to me, and she says that, she says the whole reason she went to that retreat, one of the reasons was because she heard that I may be there, and she wanted to thank me. I was like, thank me for what? And she said that she used to be paralyzed, and she, by the way, was wearing crutches. She had crutches on, and she was told by doctors that she would never walk again. That she shouldn't really, there's no really even point in trying, that she would never walk again. It was devastating for her to hear that. However, she had been doing the personal work, going through her own personal journey, and she was in a car crash, by the way. She's in a car accident that broke some C3 or something that she is very, very unlikely she would never walk again. However, when I was talking to her, she was like thanking me for the content that I've made, and I was like connecting with her. I was like, oh, this is cool. I'm so happy to hear that. She said that she listened to one of my meditations, which was literally titled Walk into a Parallel Reality, and then in the thumbnail it said no going back. And sometimes people say, oh, that's clickbait. Listen to this story, and you tell me if it's clickbait, okay? Now, basically what the meditation does is it shows people that there's an infinite number of parallel realities that exist. And what we can begin to do is just decide that this is who we are now, and we can drop our identification with the past. That's what some of these meditations do. Well, it's ironic that she did a meditation that said walk into a parallel reality when she was told she couldn't walk, and that after that meditation, she claims that now she is able to walk. And when she walks, she's still walking with crutches. It's not like she got up from that meditation and ran around the city or something like that. I don't know, maybe she did. But she was in crutches when I saw her. However, she is now able to do something doctors told her she would not be able to do, even walk with crutches, from listening to a meditation. And it's really not, the power was within her. She went beyond her current identity, the current story of what people told her, and then she was able to create a new potential, which she was then able to be. So this stuff works for not only stuff in our own life of what do we want to create in our own life, but even something with our physical body. It can have a power of that. And what is that power? It is that of going beyond your current identity, the way you're thinking, feeling, and acting, and then being this new version of you. Now, the next thing I want to talk about real quick is I want to talk a little bit about the 3 levels of our brain. Now, Dr. Joe also talks about this, but there's the neocortex, there is the limbic brain, and then there's the part of us, I'll find out exactly what it's called. There is the part of us that already has like the identity built in. It's called the cerebellum. So we have the neocortex, the limbic brain, and the cerebellum. Now, here's the way it works. The neocortex is where we learn about information. When many people may watch my YouTube channel, they may be learning information, learning ways of applying things in their life that could be very transformative. That's the neocortex. So when we learn new information, we're studying the neocortex. Now, one of the best ways you can, if there's a certain type of result you want to get, imagine somebody that's gotten that result. Don't even just imagine them. You can go meet them. You can go learn what they did in order to create their dream reality. I study someone like Tony Robbins, and I see what has Tony Robbins done in his life to get to where he is. And I kind of look at the different way, the kind of speaking he is. I look at that, and I can kind of, in a way, see the philosophy, the beliefs he has about himself, the beliefs he has about how he can impact people. I look at that using my neocortex. Then what happens is there's another part of our brain that's called the limbic brain. The limbic brain is the part of us that's able to then see something happen and put it into action, to then decide that we're going to make a new action. And when we then use that limbic brain, we have to kind of will ourselves to use it. So, for example, I may see, Tony Robbins, used to speak a lot and do a lot of speaking events. He had the belief that he could impact people in a powerful way. Well, I'm doing that on YouTube, but now I want to do that in person. I believe that that's the next step, and that's a genuine thing. I do believe that's the next step for me. So my neocortex knows that, and I've known it for a while. And now what I'm realizing is the limbic brain is the willpower where I have to actually do it. How can I show up in the world in that way? I'm going to do more live events online. I'm going to do more live events in person, and I'm going to wire that in. Then what happens is after the neocortex and the limbic brain have that relationship where one learns and then you apply that learning, which is the limbic brain, then what you have is the cerebellum, which when you've applied it in the limbic brain so many times, it becomes part of the identity. That's the repetition. So then it becomes a part of who I am. So any characteristic that you want to bring into your life, you first off learn about it. You learn how to be more courageous. You learn how to have a healthy diet. You learn how to be bold in your life and feel empowered. You learn and you see other people that have done it. It creates a model in your mind as to what that can be like, which is that of the neocortex. Then you have that of the limbic part of your brain that then applies it. You take action as that version of you. You start to, if it's with your diet, you start to eat healthy. You start to see yourself as that version of you. And then what you do is that's the doing. This is actually perfect. Think about it. Thinking, doing, being. Neocortex is thinking, limbic is doing, and cerebellum is being. Once you've done it a certain amount of repetition times, it then becomes a part of your identity. That's the key to this. Now, the only initial hard part of this is between that of the first part of it and the second part, which is the thinking and the doing. A lot of people experience blocks. And especially in the law of attraction community, some people assume that the intention is just a thought. Intention is a thought plus an action. Intention and action are also the same thing. If you're going to say, I'm going to be a full-time YouTuber, but you don't plan on making videos, you're just thinking about it, I'm sorry to tell you, but you will not actually envelop that sense of identity, that way of being in the world. And for me, that was kind of hard to hear for a while too, because when I was first learning about the law of attraction, I was doing the whole, sit on the couch type thing, where I sit on the couch and I just kind of think of things. But things weren't really happening in my life. Why weren't things happening? I'm thinking about it. I thought if I just think about it, things will happen. And then even now some people hear that. That sounds like a limiting belief, Aaron. It can be that easy. I like the middle way. To bridge two worlds. They call that the Tao. To bridge two worlds, the thinking and the doing. I like to do both. It's the middle way. It's not just thinking, and it's not just hardcore hustle action. It's a little bit of both. And this is what Dr. Joe Dispenza also talks about. An elevated emotion with a clear intention. Clear intention, elevated emotion. Merge those two things together. And if you start to apply that, it begins to change your identity. This is the key to really shifting your life. It is the learning of the neocortex, the limbic brain, which might be that of taking action and then doing it with repetition until it becomes a part of who you are, which then changes that. Then what you can do is you can focus on an ideal version of you, and every single time you meditate, that's what you can do. It could be super simple. The part of it that you do is simply that. You imagine that version of you. And you then realize that the current version of you is one that you've just repetitiously through your cerebellum, the repetition, the autopilot, that's just been you because you decided with the meaning of the neocortex in the past that is who I am now. And then through your limbic brain, you eventually patterned that into place, and then that became habitual. You can change any parts of these by changing the way you view yourself, by learning more information, which is what you're doing right now by listening to this podcast episode. You can then decide that this is who I'm now, which is that of the limbic brain, by being that version of you. And then you do it repetitiously, and the cerebellum, the being, takes care of itself. And people used to ask me a lot, how do you make daily videos on YouTube? Why are you able to do that? And the thinking to doing, the cerebellum to that of the thinking mind, the thinking mind of the neocortex to the limbic mind, is the only initial resistance there'll be. But once you repetitiously pattern it in, it becomes easy. It's a part of who you are. I've already filmed the YouTube video today, and now I'm filming and recording this podcast episode. It is super easy for me to do because it is who I am. But what you see is maybe on the cerebellum side, the way that I'm being, understand that I had initial neocortex, meaning, thinking part of it, to then the limbic mind of the doing. And that thinking and doing I danced with for a while until it became a part of my identity. So the key and the power of doing this as well, and sometimes I did a talk recently at my buddy Drew's company. He owns a company called Organifi. And when I did that talk, there was somebody in the, I talked about self-image, and I talked about our own mind, how we think, our habits of who we believe we are. And one thing that someone asked me is, well, how do you not feel like you're deluding yourself by believing you're this new identity when you have the old identity? And my answer to that is that the old identity is the delusion. It is the part of us that we have habitualized into place based on prior reference experience, and we just decided this is who I am. Many times, though, that's a way that we've given that's the way we believe we are now, when in actuality, we're so much more. We just limited ourselves and created boundaries of ourselves in that life. So the key to this is being aware that that is an illusion of itself. And when we start to see that as an illusion, that's where things really begin to change. Now, what do I mean by this? There's this one technique that Dr. Joe Dispenza has as well, and it's called the change. I don't know if he calls it the change technique, but basically what you do is every time you find yourself drifting into an old pattern that you don't prefer, which means you think about what you've been thinking about, what you do is you do some type of trigger, some type of pattern. Now, you can't see me on the podcast right now, but if I were to clap my hands like this and go change, so clap, change, and actually, and I kind of like shoot my hands forward in a clapped position, change, then that habitual pattern in my body kind of wakes me up. So if I find that every time I go to eat something unhealthy and I go, or I even think about eating something unhealthy and I go, wait, change. I've thought about what I'm thought about. That's awareness. And then I go change, and I think about that. That wakes me up out of the old autopilot mind. Then I can insert a way I prefer to believe. I remind myself, no, I eat nutrient-rich foods because it gives me more energy, and then I have more energy and I feel better, rather than the short-term pleasure of eating something unhealthy. So that's called the change technique. I actually used to do that even before I knew what it was. It's going to sound ridiculous, okay? I used to watch a show called Jersey Shore back in the day. Not no mo, but back in the day. I watched a show called Jersey Shore, and in it, they say there are these Italian guys in New Jersey. You've probably heard of it before if you're in the United States, and if not, then it's just a show with some obnoxious younger people just having fun in Jersey Shore, you know what I mean? And there's this guy named Paulie D. I was actually him for Halloween once. But they go, oh, yeah. They just say that over and over again. Oh, yeah. And I thought it was really funny. So I used to, at my old job working at Nordstrom's and Women's Shoes, I would say that a lot. Like, oh, yeah. And I would go around, and I'd say that in the back stock room a lot. And it was when it was really big back in the day. And other coworkers would be in the back stock room grabbing shoes. There's all these aisles, and I'd say, oh, yeah. And then they would go, oh, yeah, on the other side. It was just like a fun way that we communicate with each other, and it would loosen up the vibe. And when you loosen up the vibe, you feel better. Guess what? You have better days, right? Well, anytime that I'd be having like maybe a customer that I didn't really prefer to have, I could go, oh, yeah. And guess what? I would start to feel better. It's like that negative pattern of me drifting into, oh, this customer's not buying anything. I just helped them for a long time and it wasn't worth it. I would wake up from that habitualized response by going, oh, yeah. So I've already used this, but in a more eloquent way that sounds more sophisticated. You could do that change technique and go, change, and remind yourself who you are and wake up from the old identity, the old way of being. So the last thing I'll talk about with this is understanding the power of meditation. So we have the old identity and then the new identity. What meditation does is it bridges these two worlds. It bridges the two worlds, where what you can then do is realize that as you begin to go beyond how you're currently thinking, feeling, and acting, the current identity, you become aware of it, then you go beyond it using meditation. That then opens up infinite potentials, infinite possibilities. And when we allow ourselves to step into that, that's where magic begins to happen. That's where we can, then that's why they say neurons that fire together, wire together. Where as you start to see yourself differently, as you start to do meditation, which can elevate your emotion, and you can start to see yourself differently, that can then, through repetition, become who you are. So meditation can be the bridge from one reality to a new reality. And honestly, the more I talk about Dr. Joe Dispenza, the more I realize this is what I've been teaching for a long time. It's just I realize that a lot of people want to know about Dr. Joe Dispenza's teachings, and sometimes they're like, well, how do I actually apply that? What are some actual steps? And I've condensed it down to a 25, 30-minute episode as exactly how you can apply it. Meditation is extraordinarily powerful, and if you haven't seen some of the meditations I have, apply this, and will help you to wire in that new identity, to be that version of you that you prefer to be. And if you want, imagine that version of you. And remember, a clear intention with an elevated emotion is a way of directing the energy in a powerful way. But the first part about this is becoming aware of what you've been thinking about and knowing those three states of brain: thinking, feeling, or thinking, doing, and being. And the thinking is the neocortex, the limbic brain is the doing, and the cerebellum is the being. It's a part of your identity. It's who you are. And realize that as you repetitiously are a certain way, you eventually become it. We are what we repetitively do. How do we be it? We do it from the level of identity as well. You see yourself. You're not doing the healthy diet because it'll make you healthy. What you're doing is you're doing it because it's who you are. You start to put it as a part of your identity instead of waiting until the future happens until you can finally say it. If you are right now becoming aware of what people have done to become an artist, and what you do is you then become aware of the wisdom of what they did to become artists, then what you do is you do it. The limbic brain, you start to wire it in. You create art every single day. With repetition, it eventually goes into the cerebellum, which is the identity part. However, here's something that works even more powerful. Instead of waiting till it gets to the cerebellum, realize that as soon as you start to do it, you are an artist. It's not once you've done it a certain amount of time and have an art gallery studio. It's once you have done it to a certain point to where you just start. When you start is where it happens. I share this with people too, because when I talk about what I did on YouTube, I saw myself as a full-time YouTuber from the day I started daily videos. Even with 3,000 subs, even with 100 subs, I would have saw myself at it. I was just at about 3,000 or 1,800 or something like that at the time in February 2017. And that's when I started daily videos, and I said, I am a full-time YouTuber now. I do this not because if I do it, then I won't have to work my 9-to-5 job. This is just who I am. I felt like when I was expressing these ideas, it was just a part of my natural identity. So I've used this in my own life. This really does work. And what you can begin to do is become aware of what you've been thinking, feeling, and doing. Be aware of your current thoughts. Think about what you've been thinking about. Then start being and learn about how you can then be the ideal version of you. Then start to do it. Wire it in with action. Make new choices. And then what you do is you simply decide that this is who I am now. This is a part of my identity. And as you begin to do that, you'll find that you change your life. That's how it works. Now, a lot of this is Dr. Joe Dispenza's teaching. Some of it's my own interpretation of it and my own teachings, kind of, what I've talked about before, kind of mixed in with it and using my own life experience. But nonetheless, I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you haven't already, if you could do me a big favor and share this episode with someone that you think would like that potent amount of information in about a 25-minute time frame, or a 30-minute time frame. And other than that, if you haven't already, could you also review the podcast? It really helps the podcast grow as well. You can share it on Instagram, screenshot it. I will be sharing people who share it on my own profile. So you could do that as well. And other than that, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Peace, much love, and namaste. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode on the YouTube channel. Now, if you didn't know, I have a whole storehouse of information that you can see for that on Spotify or iTunes. Both are completely free, by the way. But if you want, they're easy to listen to while you're at the gym, while you're driving, anything you're doing. I do them every Tuesday and Friday. A new episode goes up. So it's called the Expand Your Awareness 2.0 podcast. I've been putting a lot of energy into it. I get a lot of DMs from people that say they love it. It's more conversational. It's a little bit more lax and casual. I feel like more of my personality comes through in it as well. So if you want, subscribe to those below. There's only a couple videos that I post on YouTube. I don't post every episode here. However, you can click below, check it out, subscribe to it, share it. And other than that, as always, I'll see you on the next one. Peace, much love, and namaste.